All right, today we're jumping into a book that pretty much turned the sales world on its head, Spin Selling. We're going to break down how it flips the script on persuasion, turning it into a real partnership. And it all comes down to mastering the art of asking better questions. So, here's the plan. First, we're going to look at why that old school sales playbook, the one, why it just doesn't cut it for big, complex deals. Then we'll get into the big idea behind Spin, break down those 4 key questions, and see how it completely changes the game. And stick around, because at the end, we'll talk about how you can use this stuff in your own life. Okay, so let's dive right in, and we're going to start with something I think we've all experienced, right? That feeling of being on the receiving end of a really aggressive, high-pressure sales pitch. So why do so many of those big sales pitches just fall flat? Well, here's the thing. That whole always be closing, feature dumping approach, yeah, it might work if you're selling something small and simple. But when the stakes are high, when the deal is complex, that same tactic doesn't just fail, it actually backfires. It can completely turn people off. And this is the huge shift at the core of it all. You can see it right here. The old way is all about telling, pitching, closing. It's totally seller-focused. The Spin way? It flips that entirely. It's about asking, diagnosing, and guiding. The focus shifts from your agenda to the client's world. It's a complete change in mindset, from pushing a product to, well, being a collaborative problem solver. So where did this revolutionary idea even come from? Well, it's from this massive study by Neil Rackham. He worked with huge companies, like Xerox and IBM, and he studied thousands of sales calls to figure out what the top performers were really doing, and what he found was not at all what people thought. And this quote really is the heart of the whole thing. The big secret to winning those huge deals, it's not about having the flashiest pitch or a million features. Nope. It's about asking really, really good questions. It's about guiding your client, letting them discover their own needs, and then helping them see the solution for themselves. The best way to think about it is like this. Imagine you're a doctor. A good doctor isn't going to walk in and immediately say, "You need surgery," right? No way. They're going to ask a ton of questions first to figure out what's really going on. That's the Spin philosophy. Diagnose before you prescribe. You have to understand the problem deeply before you can even think about offering a solution. Okay, so that's the big idea. But how do you actually do it? Well, that's where the framework comes in. And it's brilliant. SPIN is actually an acronym, SPIN, for 4 types of questions that you ask in a very specific order. So let's walk through this step by step. Each of these question types builds on the last one. It's a journey, really. You're taking the conversation from just getting the lay of the land all the way to painting a picture of what's possible. First up, the S, situation questions. These are pretty straightforward. They're all about gathering facts, understanding the current reality. What systems are you using now? Or how does your team handle this process? The key here, though, is not to overdo it. You should do your research beforehand. These questions are just to fill in the blanks, not to make them feel like they're being interrogated. Okay, once you've got the context, you move to P, problem questions. This is where things get interesting. You start asking about their challenges, their frustrations, their pain points. What's the biggest headache with that system? The real goal here is to get them to say it. It is so much more powerful when the client admits there's a problem rather than you telling them they have one. All right, now for the I, implication questions. And honestly, this is where the real magic of Spin happens. You take that problem they just told you about and you help them explore what it actually means. What are the consequences, the ripple effects? You're connecting a small nagging issue to its big, painful business impact. And that is what creates urgency. This is why it's so powerful. You're transforming what might seem like a little issue into a real, urgent need. Think about it. A small bottleneck is just an annoyance. But what's the impact of that bottleneck on your team's output? On your deadlines, on your bottom line? Suddenly, it's not so small anymore. You're not inventing problems. You're just making the cost of doing nothing crystal clear. And finally, we get to N, need payoff questions. This is where you completely flip the conversation. You stop talking about the pain and you start talking about the gain. You ask the client to imagine a better world. How would it help if you could solve that problem? The beauty of this is they start selling the solution to themselves. It becomes their idea. So you see how these questions build on each other. But Spin is more than just a script. It fundamentally changes the entire feel of the conversation, especially when it comes to those parts of sales everyone dreads, objections and the close. So, what about objections? In the old way of thinking, an objection is a roadblock, something you have to fight and overcome. But with spin, an objection is actually a clue. It's a sign that you missed something, that there's a need you haven't uncovered yet. It's not a reason to argue, it's a reason to go back and ask better questions. And that leads us to the close. If you've done the spin process right, there's no need for some cheesy, high-pressure closing technique. Why? Because the client has already walked themselves to the solution. They've identified their own problem, they've felt the pain of its implications, and they've described the payoff of solving it. At that point, moving forward just feels natural. It's the obvious next step, not some big showdown. Okay, so this is obviously a game changer for salespeople. But, and this is really important, this way of thinking, this structured curiosity, is useful for just about everyone. It's not just a sales tool. I mean, just think about it. If you're a manager, instead of just telling your team what to do, you can use this to actually diagnose what's going on with a project. In a negotiation, it turns it from an argument into a collaborative problem-solving session. Heck, you can even use it in your personal relationships to better understand where someone is coming from before you jump in with advice.
And that's really the whole point. This quote nails it. It's about transforming persuasion into partnership. You stop being just a seller or an advice giver, and you become something much more valuable, a trusted advisor, someone who actually helps create positive change.
So that's what spin selling is all about. And it leaves us with a really powerful question to think about in our own lives. What important truth could you uncover today if you just took a moment to ask a better question?